In this next few videos, we're going to look at the subject of caching. Now, caching is one of the new features added to ASP.NET that has really sped up the process quite a bit. ASP.NET runs just a bit slower than standard ASP the first time a page is requested. But after that, it has been compiled and it runs a lot faster. And then we can further speed it up by using caching. Now, there's a number of different places we can use caching. But before we talk about those, let's talk about exactly what is caching. And I'm going to start off with a little animation here to show you. When a user is sitting at a client machine, a PC, and they type into a browser, and across the internet they make a request of a web server. Now, what they're looking for is a page.aspx file. And so they just want this to show up in their browser. They've requested a web page. Now, when their request hit the browser, the ASPX extension for that file tipped the server off that this is an ASP.NET file, and it needs to be compiled, and the .NET framework needs to jump into play here. And then this thing needs to go through compilation, and the ASP code needs to be run on it to do any kind of conditional processing, connect to database servers, and so forth. And then this needs to be basically rendered back into HTML and passed back to the client. Now, if this page is going to be pulled over and over and over, the idea with caching is, wait a minute, let's don't go through this whole processing every time. Let's just save this thing in memory and then just kind of snatch this thing out of memory and throw it back. So let's look at how this would work in caching. Again, this client is going to make a request to the web server, except that this time this page has been written into cache. It was requested the first time and it was cached. And so now, instead of going through the process of compilation or anything else, we just simply snatch this thing out of memory and throw it back at the client. Now, obviously, there's some things we have to be concerned about with caching. How long does it need to live there? What kind of duration do we want on this thing? What if somebody asks for different parameters on the file? Some of the kind of under the hood things on caching. First of all, there's 3 types of caching that are available to you in ASP.NET. The first type we'll talk about is object caching. Now, this is also known as page data caching. Some of the third-party documentation out there, and even in some of Microsoft's documentation, they'll interchange these words between object caching and page data caching. They mean the same thing. And notice by page data, we mean that there's data on that page, variables or other information. This can even be data that we've pulled out of databases, entire data sets, that we can write to a cache object. We can add it to the cache object and then retrieve it later. So in the case of database information, instead of having to go back to the database server to pull that information, we just jerk it out of memory. And notice I'm using words like snatch and jerk because memory is so much faster than the disk or network connections. Second type of caching we'll look at here is output caching. This is probably the most popular so far. And this is what I actually demonstrated in the previous animation right before this page. And that is where we take entire web pages, write them into memory, and then on future requests for them, we just simply grab those things out of memory and throw them back out at the server. Now, this is excellent. This is an excellent way to speed up a website when you have a page that has fairly static information, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Page fragment is the third kind of caching that's available to you, and this is really user-controlled caching. Now, what happens is sometimes you may want to output an entire web page. And then other times you've got just a fragment of a page that you need to send out. That's the same on every page in the website, or most of the pages, or 6 of the pages on the website. What we can do is implement page fragment caching. We're going to turn that portion of the page into a user control and then turn caching on that user control. So every page that hits that has that piece in there simply pulls that little section of the page out of memory. So that generally is caching. That's the 3 types. Now in the next few videos we're going to take these apart a little bit, look at them, look at an example on 1 or 2 of them, and get you a little bit more comfortable with the idea of caching. You need to know this. This is the way to really pick up the efficiency on your web app.